Welcome back to the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast and Blast. This is Hal Herring. We're sponsored now by Sitka Gear. Sitka's the sole sponsor of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast and Blast. Anybody listening to this probably knows that Sitka products are designed to get you through any of the most radical situations in the backcountry, or in the duck marsh or on the river. So if you're not already acquainted with their products, please check that out. We're proud to be associated with them. I'd also like to invite all the listeners of the podcast to Backcountry Hunters and Anglers' 7th Annual Rendezvous. It's going to be the biggest gathering of conservation-minded hunters and anglers in our country. And this is happening April 12th through the 14th in Boise, Idaho. Meeting people like Stephen Ranella, Remy Warren, Randy Newberg, Hank Shaw. Hank's one of the best wild game cooks in the world. And you'll be able to rub shoulders with hundreds of other public land owners and public land sportsmen. It's always been a really good time. Tickets are on sale now, and they cover all kind of activities there. You've got the Brew Fest, the Camp Chef Cook-Off. There's all kind of seminars. What's growing in popularity has been the headlining storytelling event. It's just really a good time. It's not to be missed. If this is the kind of lifestyle you lead, your tickets are now available at backcountryhunters.org. This is Hal Herring with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast and Blast. We're on a snowy day in Missouri, outside of Jefferson City. What do you call this community, Brandon?
We're just outside of Fayette.
Outside of Fayette. We're kind of in the heart of the Civil War, Missouri, as we've been talking about this morning.
Yeah, just across the county is Boone's Lick, so pretty historic part of the state. Daniel Boone and his family ended up out here from Kentucky later in life, and a lot of Civil War battles. Missouri never declared either Union or Confederate, so this is one of those states where you truly had brother fighting brother.
Yeah. And the history is unbelievably bloody. We were talking about Bloody Bill Anderson, Quantrill. So before we talk about all that, I'm with Brandon Butler, and he's the executive director of the Conservation Federation of Missouri, and I'll let him tell you what that is. But he's also a very prominent outdoor writer with a column in over 30 newspapers in Missouri and Indiana, covering real nuts and bolts stuff too, man. I was reading your ice fishing piece. And just the real nitty gritty of hunting and fishing, experiential and practical both.
I try to pull my Hal Herring once in a while, get deeper and more political, and my editors like to slap me back into place and
bring those jigs back.
Yeah,
Brandon.
You're here to talk to hunters and fishermen about fishing
and fishing and hunting.
Yeah.
Well, you've got kind of a unique background enabling you to do that. I don't know anybody that does more fishing and hunting than you have or done. Tell me, first, I know you and I started this conversation long time ago, and we were talking about the Kankakee Swamp there. And tell me about that and some of your background of growing up and how you got to where you're at.
I grew up in northwest Indiana, right off the tip of Lake Michigan, in a really unique area that at one time was a very pristine natural resource environment. And then the Industrial Revolution came in, and the steel mills lined the lakeshore, and industry kept moving south, and all of a sudden they decided they were going to drain the entire Grand Kankakee Marsh. At one time, over 20% of all North American waterfowl came off the Great Lakes down through that marsh. Wow. And they turned about a 230-mile meandering wetland into a 90-mile shipping ditch. So I grew up deer hunting on a farm in Newton County, in
Indiana.
Indiana.
Yeah.
So that would be the right on the Illinois border, second from the northwest corner. I grew up in Lake County, which is the northwest corner. So you got Lake Michigan on the north side of the county, and you got South Chicago on the west side of the county.
Yeah.
Newton County is one county south, and I had to stand in what they called the dunes. But there wasn't standing water within 30 miles.
Uh-huh.
So this sand was at one time underwater in the Grand Kankakee Marsh, and very, very heavy Native American area, and tons of artifacts in that area that are now easier to find, are on top of mounds and such. But it's a sad situation to know that at one time, this was an incredible natural resource area, and now it's just another scar that we've put on the earth.
Yeah, I guess. And when we were talking a lot about your time in Montana and whatnot, it's easy to see the long picture when you're on those glacial, tills of Montana or whatever. I imagine the Kankakee Marsh will be back in some way, shape, or form in 500 years. Or
Mother Nature has a way of replenishing,
of reclaiming whatever we take. And not in the short term by any means, but so you got and it was an interesting history though. I mean, y'all bounced, your family bounced in hunting and fishing like all the way to Reelfoot Lake, and they had a history of being born down in there. Right, like hardscrabble cotton farmers in Tennessee, right?
Yeah, so my dad's father was born and raised on a cotton plantation in northwest Tennessee, close to Reelfoot Lake. So I had a unique kind of upbringing in the outdoors. My dad, we're really close and great guy, but he doesn't really hunt or fish. And once in a while I can stretch him. We took a fly-in trip to northern Ontario this year together, and that was great that he stretched his comfort zone, and he's much happier at a golf course. And,
but he was he was working so hard at those years. That's what happened with my father too. They worked so hard to support their families and to build something.
But his dad would go back to Reelfoot Lake, so his dad was in a unique family in the sense that his mother had him real young, like 13. And so he ended up being older than some of his aunts and uncles. And so this family was huge, 13 kids in my great-grandma's generation. And these guys would get together every year at Reelfoot Lake, and there'd be 50 or 60 of them. And it was a man's trip. There was drinking going on, and it wasn't a place for a boy to be. And so I heard about all these trips and how my grandpa went out west hunting in Colorado and Wyoming. And from him, I kind of learned like the importance of doing this with your buddies, like getting involved in the outdoors to spend time with the guys. On my mom's side, that grandpa had a totally different approach, and he took me at a young age on trips with my grandma and him to Minnesota. So I got a real like family-oriented version of the outdoor involvement from my mom's side, and then I got to like get away with your buddies outdoor involvement from my dad's side. And I've kind of tried to blend that myself between friends and family over time. Yeah,
I just made that connection with you're building a cabin in the Ozarks, and I was down there, and it's, what was it, like 12 degrees. It's an incredible time of winter in the Ozarks. And we're going to talk about Missouri and the Ozarks and those rivers because they were incredible stuff. But those mounts at your cabin are your grandfather's.
Yeah.
Tell me that. I know we were having a drink or two in the late night in that freezing cold, but I didn't get it. There's an antelope and a big muley.
And a whitetail from Tennessee.
Yeah.
And he's got a big elk from the Jackson area of Wyoming that's in my uncle's barn. But him and these guys back in the early 70s, they would take a motorhome and tow a Jeep, and they just hit Wyoming, Colorado, wherever for 2 weeks. And back then, you could pay $100 to trespass on just about any ranch. And they just killed some stud deer back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I just put together that when you told me that background.
And then Grandma moved out of the house that they lived in for all those years, and for some reason the mounts didn't go with her to her new condo. So they got divvied up amongst the guys, and I got those.
Yeah, that's a nice antelope.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so you came into this, and you came to Missouri when?
2010.
And you I know you did a sojourn in Montana and all that.
Yeah, it's been kind of a long road, So I was at Purdue. I graduated from Purdue, and one of my friend's fathers left the.
What did you study?
Organizational leadership.
Okay, not a bad preparation for what you're in now.
Yeah, and but there's a lot of oil refineries on Lake Michigan. Oil comes in off the lake, and Amoco's got a big plant up there. And one of my buddy's dad was working there, and he transferred to Thermopolis, Wyoming.
Gotcha.
And the summer after my junior year, we went out there and stayed for 2 weeks. And it was the first time I'd seen the Rocky Mountains, saw Yellowstone. We went in the Red Desert and rode four-wheelers, rode horses in the National Forest, shot prairie dogs. All the things that a guy would want to do. Caught my first wild trout.
How did you come up on the Red Desert?
His dad just knew that whole area.
Yeah.
He just took us all over and wanted us to see these different places. And when I got back to Purdue, my entire life focus shifted.
Yeah.
It went from going home and being the fourth generation owner of a construction company to I'm moving to the mountains.
Yeah.
And really gave me some direction for the first time other than just going home. And I never dreamed I'd, never go home, which I haven't, and I don't think I ever will.
Yeah.
But, I ended up in Denver after college for about a year, and then ended up in Billings about a 4-year stint there in Montana.
Yeah.
So.
I know. I mean, you were on the road, I know, as a sales rep, and every place I've been in Montana 27 years, and every place I talked about, you knew what restaurant it was and what hotel it was and what was nearby where the hunting was.
It was an interesting turn of events to end up in the pharmaceutical sales world. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no interest in that. It just kind of fell in my lap. I was called by a recruiter, and the money was too good to say no to, but the best part of it was I had to go to every community in Montana that had a provider.
Yeah.
So that's either a doctor, a nurse practitioner, or a physician assistant.
Yeah.
So if there's 200 people there, I had to go to that community at least once a month and call on that office. So yeah, I was only in Montana for 4 years, but I bet there's not too many people that have spent their life there that's seen more of the state than I have.
I mean, you're blowing my mind on that, like the Plentywood, Scobie, axis in from northeast.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a part of the state. It's really far from where I live, even though I live in the eastern part of the state.
I could still roll into the Cottonwood Hotel in Glasgow and order without seeing a menu.
Yeah. That's a great community, too.
I love Glasgow.
Glasgow's a great place.
Absolutely.
That's talk about gateway to the big open in the that Missouri breaks.
Well, my problem
is so wild.
I thought I'd move out there and become this great elk hunter and mule deer hunter, but I was so ingrained in whitetail hunting.
Yeah.
When you get out there and there's just whitetails running around everywhere, and very few people paying attention to them, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to say, okay, I want to go chase a mule deer, but there's 140, 150 inch whitetails running everywhere that I can shoot with my bow, and and that's ended up being what I spent most of my time doing up on the Milk River.
Right. I know you got one nice one on the Milk River, right?
Yeah. And then another nice one on the Yellowstone by Hysham.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so that's a perfect place to go to. So I know you'd been fishing and running with real old time outdoorsmen forever. And I remember you told me you had a stack of outdoor magazines that were like 20 feet tall. I mean, everything from like Fishing Facts. We were talking about. I could read off the cover of Fishing Facts from when I was like 6, and that was the magazine of structure fishing. It was all walleyes, as far as I remember.
A lot of yellow perch.
Yellow perch, yeah, and something that I had no idea growing up in Alabama anything about. But I read it and I was like, I will apply these techniques at the Madison County Lake. But you were saying it was kind of unlikely that you would end up as an outdoor writer. But the truth of it is it wasn't unlikely because you were steeped in outdoor writing from the very beginning. I mean, I'm looking at your library right here in your office. It's huge, I mean, it almost have been and tell us about how you met Don Thomas. And just to preface this, Don Thomas is a really incredible bow hunter, physician, now mostly retired, living in Lewistown, Montana. Don is really one of the icons of Montana hunting and fishing, although he doesn't write about fishing that much. Well, he does. He's done it all.
Yeah, Dream Fishing Road Trips is one of his books.
That's it. Yeah, he's done it all. And he's one of my heroes.
He's one of my heroes, too.
Yeah.
I'll step back a second and say...
We did not know this association, you and I, when we first met.
Right.
I had no idea. You go, do you know Don Thomas? And I was like, I do.
Yeah. So to step back a second and say, I never dreamed I could be an outdoor writer. It wasn't one of those things that I thought you could just train to be. Like, maybe it was just bestowed down upon the lucky ones. But when I was a kid, just before cable television came along, Chicago had a UHF channel. It was a Christian channel, 38. And on Saturday mornings, you could get fishing shows from 5:30 in the morning till 10.
Okay.
And I'd go over and spend the night with my grandpa. And we're talking 1988, 1989. So I was 8 and 9 years old. And, Bill Dance, Westmoreland, Jimmy Houston, Roland Martin, Midwest Outdoors. This is before they even dreamed of putting hunting on. It was just fishing shows. But we would sit there in the mornings, set our alarm for 5:30 to get up, and he'd make breakfast, and we'd watch fishing shows. So I was ingrained into this outdoor media, whether I knew it or not, at a really young age. And he kept all these magazines, and he'd go through them and highlight and underline and make notes, and then he'd apply that knowledge when he'd go to Minnesota on his week-long trips. And I was fortunate to get to go before I got into high school and busy with sports and things. So,
what did he do for a living? You told me.
He ended up the vice president of a bank in Gary, Indiana.
And his passion was fishing.
He grew up in the Depression. I mean, they actually ate crappies that he could catch during the Depression, and then he was a World War II pilot, and
Yeah.
he just loved to fish.
Yep.
It was amazing. So all this, at an early age, I was really ingrained into outdoor media. But again, I never dreamed that it was something that you actually could become.
Yeah.
And I'm out in Montana, and I go into this doctor's office, and I will say I was probably the worst pharmaceutical rep in the history of pharmaceutical. I did not like the job at all. I struggled with it. Spent much more time fishing and hunting my way around the state of Montana than I did calling on doctors. So you can imagine what it was like as far as a relief to walk into a doctor's office and this scruffy dude comes out in blue jeans that have elk blood stains on them. Yep. And I'm like, you're a doctor?
Yeah.
And then there's a whole shelf of outdoor books, and I'm looking at them, and then I'm like, wait a minute. It's his name.
And they're all him.
Yeah, they're all his books. And then I start figuring out who this guy
and
is.
They're good.
And they're
so good. Yeah.
Yeah. They're so good. And, it's diverse, too.
Yep.
Ranella's been talking a lot about generalists lately.
Yep.
That's what I've always been. It's just whatever you want to go do today, I'm interested in going and doing it.
Yep.
And here's this Don Thomas guy. And, he's a fly fisherman and a traditional bow hunter primarily.
Yeah.
But he's also a wing shooter and a duck hunter. And, they go up and fish for walleyes on the Missouri. And he's down in Arizona. And
spent all that time in Alaska.
In Alaska. And he's a pilot and all these different things that are just so cool, and as I get to know him, I said, man, I would give anything to be an outdoor rider. And he didn't give me any magic bullets or nothing. He just said, well, do it then.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm gonna. All right, I will. And I swear it was just like a river runs through it, when he's got to come down and give his dad that paper, and the dad chucks it in the garbage cans that says, again, half as long.
Yeah.
So I wrote some stories and took them to Don, and he's like, no, these are horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were.
Yeah.
And I ended up back in Indiana. We left Montana with a couple little babies in tow and got back to Indiana. I went to the Bloomington, Indiana newspaper.
Did you ever write a column or a story that passed Don's muster?
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So I get back to Indiana, and the Bloomington, Indiana newspaper has a really good outdoor page, but they don't have a fishing report.
Yeah.
So I put this PowerPoint presentation together, and I go in to meet with the editor and publisher, and I'm halfway through this PowerPoint on why they should make me the fishing report writer.
Yeah.
And finally they said, wait, will you do it for free? And I said, yes, I'll do it for free. So I take on this free fishing column, and a couple months later they made some space for me and actually made me a columnist. And that was in September of 2006. And I've written an outdoor column for newspapers every week since.
Uh-huh.
And over time, it was obvious that it was a passion. And I look back on those articles now, and I just wonder how they could have printed them. They were so bad,
right.
But then I ended up going.
Well, they didn't have anybody else.
I was free.
Yeah,
so I went to work for the Department of Natural Resources and Constituent Services for the governor. And it was during the Great Recession when there was a total freeze on hiring anybody new.
Yeah.
And the staff writer of the state outdoor magazine, or the state conservation magazine, Outdoor Indiana, had a heart attack and just retired on the spot. So they said, congratulations, you're also now the staff writer of the state conservation magazine.
Okay, gotcha.
And then I got an editor for the first time, and his name's Marty Benson, and he's still there. And, he took the passion and the drive and desire and made me into a professional writer. He was the guy that I credit for actually teaching me how to be a writer as far as functionally. And then time went on, and I got involved in a lot of these outdoor writing organizations, and POMA is kind of, when it comes to the awards, POMA does the Pinnacle Awards, and there's only one winner.
POMA being the Professional Outdoor Media Association.
Right.
Yeah.
And I won for magazine writing, and Don Thomas was the editor from Traditional Bowhunter magazine.
Yeah.
So I went from him throwing them in the garbage to winning first place and the largest outdoor riding awards in the country.
Wow.
So it was a cool story.
Yeah. Do you remember what the story was?
Yeah, it was about going to Fred.
I assume you do, but maybe not. Yeah.
No, I do. It was about going to Fred Bear's house.
Right. Yeah, you told me this. Okay, tell a little bit about that.
It was in Traditional Bowhunter magazine.
Yeah.
And my family we were going to Mackinac Island in Michigan on a vacation.
Yeah.
And my wife and kids and mom and dad, they don't even know who Fred Bear is, you know.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to go through Grayling, and I'm like, hey, we got to stop here. There's certainly a Fred Bear museum or something, and we pull into Grayling, and I go into this sports shop, and I said, hey, I'm looking for, you know, Fred Bear, and this guy like doesn't even look up from the counter, and he, you know, there's nothing here. And you could tell instantly it was not a good topic of conversation. And my mom always has to look at real estate when we go places, so we went into this real estate office, and I'm asking this lady, and she's like, well, see that driveway over there? That's his old house. And I said, you're kidding me. She's like, it's a dentist office now. Go over there and talk to this guy's name was Barry. Go talk to Barry. And so I go in and I'm like, hey, I just really want to see this, you know, and it's raining.
Yeah.
It's northern Michigan and cold. And my family's just in the car, like, what's he doing now? You know, and I'm in there getting permission to like walk around Fred Bear's house. So they say you can go behind the house.
How old were you then at this time?
30.
Yeah.
30, you know.
Yeah.
It was 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's raining, and I'm standing on Fred Bear's dock on the Asable River, just kind of marveling at this wood duck box that he must have built by hand that was just dilapidated and kind of falling apart. And all of a sudden I hear, hey, and I look, and it's that dentist on the back porch, and he can tell that I'm going to do no harm.
Yeah.
So at that point,
perhaps you might not go away if he doesn't let you in.
So he brings me in the house, and I'm sitting on the hearth of the fireplace. And, you know, this is a room that Fred Bear lived in, but Glenn St. Charles and Howard Hill and all these giants of the industry likely passed through. And it was a surreal moment for me. And, but then I did a bunch more investigating and digging and kind of found out like the sentiment of the town of Grayling is still divided on Fred Bear after he pulled up stakes and moved the company down to Jacksonville, Florida, and
that was the source of the animosity.
Yeah, because that was the jobs in Grayling, Michigan at the time. You know, the forestry industry is down, and Bear was a big deal. And so there's still that, and it's a shame that there's not a museum and there's not a monument.
Yeah, they ought to let that go and build on it.
They absolutely should. There should be like
they were furious because some of them had to move to Florida or just not do it anymore, right? Not work.
So it was tough, but I mean, at this point, it would be great if there was some kind of a place that you could go and see the history of bear archery.
Unbelievable history too, man.
Really, the history of modern archery.
Yeah, yeah. So when you came back, I know you didn't come back to Indiana. You came back to. Why did you came to Missouri to get that to do the DNR work, right?
No, I was doing the DNR work in Indiana, so I kind of looked at my resume. You know, I ended up going through my master's at Gonzaga, so I'd had 6 years of progressive sales experience, and I did the state government, and I'd established a communications career, and I had the education. But I thought, if I'm going to move into some kind of leadership role, what am I missing from my resume? And I needed marketing, and You know, I'm a gun guy, and Midway USA had a marketing manager position based here in Columbia at their headquarters, really handling the marketing for Caldwell Shooting Supplies, Tipton Gun Cleaning Supplies, Wheeler Engineering. So it was a subsidiary company of Midway called Battenfeld Technologies. I got the marketing manager job, and that's what brought us to Missouri.
Gotcha.
So I did that for a little over 3 years, and then I went in and did some independent marketing for Walther Arms when they divided back off from Smith & Wesson and kind of recreated their own North American.
I remember when they did that. Yeah.
And then Starline Brass, Sierra Bullets, and that was before I took the job at the Federation. So I rounded out my resume by doing some outdoor industry marketing. Right,
gotcha. Well, you landed in, and we're going to talk about Missouri a lot here in a few minutes. I think what I want to make sure that anybody listening to this gets is I've been in the Rocky Mountains for 27 years. I came from Alabama. Alabama has really strong conservationists. I've kind of been pushing on the South because we have so many environmental problems, and it seems like a minority of people care. And that's not really true. We have some super, super strong conservation hard-working outdoorsmen, hunting and fishermen that are working for conservation in the South. And that's just true. The energy seems to be in the West. It's around public lands, and it's around watersheds, and it's around big elk and bighorn sheep and pronghorn on public land. Right, the energy seems to be in the West, and but what I want to make absolutely clear is that the energy has been in Missouri. The conservation runs American blood red in Missouri, and it has for a long time. And I don't wholly understand, what the genesis of that is. Missouri is a very unique place, like we're talking about the Civil War, utterly divided place, the birthplace of the James Gang, the brutal history in the Civil War, and just a root hog or die people. There ain't no doubt. So that has been, but Missouri's the first to come up with that sales tax we were talking about. We're going to talk about that a little bit. The first to have one of the best conservation magazines, but from the state. It goes on and on. First to have a small sales tax to support state parks. And I don't think it's populism we're talking about here. It's just conservation and a kind of a knowing. And I think maybe because of the spectacular beauty of the Ozarks, that people kind of know where their bread is buttered. And it's not necessarily just on economics. It's conservation as a basis of economics. I don't understand it. You're the guy. And so tell me a little bit about Missouri in that sense.
Well, I'm going to tell you a lot about it.
Yeah,
it can't do it in a little.
I'm blown away. I'm blown away by it.
You got to go back in history to look at the kind of people that settled in Missouri. I mean, we're the show me state, and that just makes all the sense in the world. This is just a real kind of hard-nosed people. It's tough to buffalo people in Missouri. I mean, it's really the show me state. Show me then why you want to do it that way, or show me what it's going to accomplish.
Yeah.
And when you talk about Montana and populating the West, those people came through Missouri.
Yeah.
A lot of them came back to Missouri.
A lot of them are Missourians.
John Coulter came back to Missouri after his time in Montana. I mean, the Lewis and Clark expedition started in Missouri. So St. Louis, we've got that big, beautiful arch.
Yep.
That's the representation of the gateway to the West.
Yeah.
And to this day, Missouri truly represents that gateway to the West. This is where things really start changing. There's dirt roads that you saw some yesterday. We can get lost on dirt roads in the Ozark Mountains, just like you can in Montana.
It's one of the most dramatic pieces of country that I've seen in the United States.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's
throw that in the hopper. I mean,
relatively unknown.
Yeah.
So anyways, as we were talking about on that Grand Kankakee Marsh and the destruction that was taking place there in the 1920s, that was not unique. There was destruction taking place all across the eastern United States as the Industrial Revolution came into power, and market hunting. We'd already decimated the buffalo herds in the West, but in the East we had decimated. I mean, the passenger pigeon was gone.
Yeah, the buffalo had been in the East too, right here.
Oh, right here, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had basically wiped out our fish and game populations across Missouri. And thankfully, there was a group of conservationists, early conservationists at the time, that got together and said, look, we have to take politics out of conservation. Unfortunately, many states still operate in the sense that when a governor changes, it doesn't matter how good that former director of the State Fish and Wildlife Agency was doing. They get yanked and somebody's brother-in-law gets the job.
Right.
You see all this turnover, and policy and programs can't move forward because it's so politically tied.
Yeah.
Well, this group led by a guy named E. Sidney Stevens came together in September 10th, 1935 at the Columbia, Missouri Tiger Hotel and said, look, we're going to run an initiative petition. So Missouri, I believe only 19 states in America have the initiative petition process where citizens can get enough signatures to get something on the ballot and change the constitution of the state. So these guys organized back then in 1935 and brought in some heavy hitters. Nash Buckingham was in his prime as a waterfowl rider. They brought him up from that Tunica area, Memphis.
Yeah, Mississippi Delta.
And put him on PR work, but he didn't drive, so they had to hire a driver, too, to send him around Missouri and try to build public awareness of this campaign. Ding Darling, who went on to found the duck stamp, created the National Wildlife Federation. He was at that meeting in 1935. must have got a little bored. He drew a sketch on a paper tablecloth, and it's about, 18 inches by 12 inches. And thankfully, the editor of the newspaper at the time was smart enough to tear that sketch off and frame it.
Cool.
And it hangs in my office today. So
I've
got a pencil, an original pencil drawing by Ding Darling that predates the duck stamp.
Wow.
Hanging in my office. And, they have now the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge down on Sanibel Island in Florida.
If anybody has any kind of lust or passion for this, you Google up those Ding Darling cartoons, and they're out there.
Yeah, he won a Pulitzer Prize twice for political cartoons. And he has one that's really famous, and it shows a march on Washington. And it's all these conservationists that, we don't want talk, we demand action. And, he was an early driver of this conservation movement. And we're talking, relatively close to the Teddy Roosevelt days. We're more into the Franklin Roosevelt time.
Yeah.
And, in fact, Sid Stevens was a personal friend of FDR. When FDR called that big meeting in the late 30s in Washington, D.C., that first Conservation Council or Congress, E. Sidney Stevens went there and gave a speech that everybody said just shook the windows in the place. And so anyways, they create this initiative petition and they run it. There was a man out in Kansas City named Tom Pendergrast who was the boss. He was the boss. He's the guy that made Harry Truman president, essentially. Okay. So
he was a kingmaker.
He was the man, yeah. And once he signed off on this initiative petition, we knew it was, it was a go. And we hit the state running, and it passed. And it stripped control of forest fish and wildlife from the legislature. So now you've got state reps and state senators who can't touch a state agency. So they immediately file lawsuits, and they brought in a guy from Iowa to be the first director named I.T. Bodie. And they wouldn't pay his salary. So a wealthy guy, they wouldn't allocate the funds from general revenue to pay his salary. So a guy named Edward Love out of St. Louis funded his salary until they got it all cleaned up in the courts. And so it wasn't like an easy transition. We look back on history often and we think, Roosevelt must have just breezed through with these ideas. But
another decree.
Right. There was
no such
plenty
thing,
of animosity towards these ideas that we now look back on. Roosevelt was so good that, now he lives for eternity on the face of a mountain because of these ideas that people were trying to block back at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
Same thing here. People were trying to block this. And to this day, what I do for a living, what I get paid for, is to fight back against the politicians that are trying to overturn this 82 years later.
Yeah.
And
so, in a sense, it has ever been thus, and people fought their way through it.
Right.
I mean, I if there's any kind of fatigue amongst people, and I feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, good Lord, why would we question this now when it's worked so long, right? But there it is, questioned, always been questioned, and people answered in the affirmative. No, we're not the affirmative. We're not going to get rid of this. We're going to keep doing this because it works and it makes our lives better in every way.
But it's crazy how often people vote against their own best interests.
They do, and this goes back to something Randy Newberg always says, and he said, you just remember this, conservation is not convenient.
It's not, no.
If you're looking for the convenient way, it's almost like a Zen Buddhist state saying, if it is convenient, it is not conservation. It may be long-term very convenient in that you got clean water and clean air and fish to catch. But in the short-term, conservation is not convenient, and perhaps legislators live only in the moment.
Yeah, so at the time that passed, there was an approximate,
keep going.
400 whitetails in the state of Missouri. And maybe 2,000 turkeys.
Yeah.
There was a property. It's called Caney Mountain, and Aldo Leopold's son Starker was hired by this brand new Department of Conservation to come down and be a biologist studying in this Caney Mountain area. And today it's a natural area that we have here in the state and public property. But that's where the largest population of remnant turkeys were still alive.
Okay.
And it's real close to the Arkansas border, kind of in the center of the state. So they built this cabin for Starker Leopold up on this bluff. I actually just went there. It's amazing. I mean, he's got a well house and stairs chiseled into a bluff that goes up to this log. So
where is this?
It's close to Gainesville, Missouri. You drove right past it when you were coming up from Mountain Home. It's real close to the Arkansas border. Heart of the Ozark Mountains.
Yeah.
And so Aldo Leopold spent a lot of time in Missouri. He did a game study here, and then his son actually came and lived here. Starker went on to be famous in his own right. So the right people were involved.
Yep.
Ding Darling, Sid Stevens, the Leopolds, in this whole Missouri model. And everything got settled, and the department got to work. And these directors were free to operate without political interference. So, they were able to set deer seasons, and they were able to set prices and hire people that were able to stay in the jobs for the long term without fear of any political retribution for decisions that they made. So science was able to truly rule the day.
Yeah.
And it worked, because today, we've got 1.3 million whitetails in Missouri. We lead the nation in turkey harvest. We actually go back and forth with Wisconsin now, who Wisconsin guys are hunting Missouri turkeys, because we traded turkeys to Wisconsin.
Wow.
The turkeys that were cannon trapped in Missouri from the 50s really through the 70s and were replanted across the Midwest, or the reason why I grew up in northern Indiana with no turkeys, but now my mom can't put a bird feeder out without getting attacked by turkeys.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But those are Missouri turkeys.
Yeah.
And it's just an amazing story. So fast forward 40 years, the department's rolling along. They've got all this authority, but the General Assembly can still set the revenue for the department through general revenue like they do for all state agencies. And the people rose up again, and they said, this is wrong. We want more. We have to keep pushing this envelope forward. So we ran another initiative petition in 1976 to create the conservation sales tax. So it's a 1/8 of a cent sales tax. That means if you spend $8 on taxable goods, you're putting a penny into the coffers for conservation.
Okay.
And today that adds up to roughly $120 million a year. Okay. So our department is so well funded that they can do the things that need to be done. And the result of that is not only healthy forest, fish, and wildlife populations, but we don't pay for boat ramps. We don't pay to go into some of the nicest nature centers in the country. We have urban outreach programs. And the result of all that is we have the number one growth rate for not only retention, but recruitment of new hunters. Missouri leads the country in new hunter recruitment. The magazine I wrote for in Indiana, Outdoor Indiana, we struggled to get to like 15,000 subscribers. The Missouri Conservationist, if you're a resident of the state, you sign up and you get it. So it goes to 600,000 households.
Holy smokes.
So we have means of educating people through our outreach and education program at the Department of Conservation. Kansas City, St. Louis, Cape Girardeau, Columbia, Kirksville, Springfield, all have just incredible nature centers where kids come from school programs. Yeah. And then, of course, we have people in this state like Johnny Morris at Bass Pro Shops that, supports the department and furthers education through programs. Like he has a wolf school where fifth graders can apply to go to this school that's at Bass Pro Shop. Yeah. And they spend the year going to school in this special Johnny Morris built classroom and learn about conservation. And I'm fortunate to get to go down and speak to these kids. And so conservation is just part of everybody's life, whether you want it to be or not. Yeah. You're contributing to the conservation sales tax. Yeah. Now, of course, there's people out there that complain like we shouldn't be paying this sales tax without, but look, state sales tax, statewide sales tax, you're paying 4.225% in Missouri, with 4% going to, or 3% going to general revenue, 1% going to education, 0.125% going to conservation, and 0.1 going to park, soil, and water. We'll talk about that in a second. So the average Missourian is paying about $6 per year into this sales tax, which means if you're willing to give up one fast food meal per year, you don't have to pay to ever launch a boat. You don't have to pay for the fish that are being stocked into our rivers, lakes, and streams. Right. If you like seeing a bald eagle fly, if you like the fact that there's healthy forest canopy across more than 1 million acres of public-owned land in this state, state-owned public land that's well managed. That's besides the Mark Twain National Forest and other lands that we have here as well. So, it's an absolute model that I don't understand why it hasn't been replicated.
So Arkansas picked it up?
Arkansas has a tax. Minnesota has a tax. But here in Missouri, it's a system. It's a model. We call it the Missouri model of conservation that so few people know about outside of the state. I had no idea before I moved here. And especially,
I've been tracking this for years just because it was a logical solution to so many of the arguments. And I actually don't want to get lost in all that. But where the bird watchers who should be paying their way, I agree.
Right.
But the bird watcher are going, or the wolf people, for instance, out west, they were like, we love the wolf, and the hunters are like going, well, our license money is paying to work on biologists who do something that I don't agree with at all.
Right.
Right. And then that's true. That's a legitimate thing to say. Right. I mean, I don't particularly agree with it, but it's a legitimate thing to say. This sales tax just blows that completely out of the water. You now have another thing of revenue that is dependent upon no one user group. We all share in it.
Yeah, and so what I do so the Conservation Federation is the organization that came together and formed that day, September 10th, 1935, and exists to this day. So today,
let's explain what that is.
Yeah, so we're one of the largest and oldest state-based conservation organizations in the country. We're an early affiliate we predate the National Wildlife Federation, but we're an affiliate to the National Wildlife Federation. We're a sister organization to the Montana Wildlife Federation, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I think there's 51 now affiliates to the National Wildlife Federation.
Okay.
We have a little over 5,000 individual members that just send in their dues, but our real strength is in the fact that we have 92 affiliated organizations here in the state. And that's everything from Ducks Unlimited to Trout Unlimited to the Missouri Corn Growers Association to the Association of Electric Co-ops, Coalition for the Environment. Like, I'll do things strategically at meetings where I'll sit the Sierra Club people next to the Missouri Trappers Association, and I'll sit the Coalition for the Environment next to the Association of Electric Co-ops. And it's amazing to see what people can accomplish when they put aside their 10 or 20% differences and focus on that big picture, which will take us back to that park, soil, and water sales tax. One of the career highlights for me so far was really leading the renewal of this other sales tax that we have that actually sunsets every 10 years, meaning it has to come back up for a vote. And it basically is about $100 million a year. It's a 1/10 of a cent sales tax. So for every $10 you spend, $1 goes to supporting park, soil, and water.
Okay.
The difference is agriculture benefits a lot from this sales tax. We have 114 counties in Missouri, so we have 114 conservation or soil and water conservation districts. So that's where farmers can go to apply for grants to work on soil erosion, and hopefully that'll improve water quality. We have we're a hilly state, so we have a lot of terracing in our fields to try to keep soil on the ground. So that's agriculture's reason for really being bought into this sales tax. And then on the other side of it is our state parks. And we have, I believe, 92 state parks in Missouri, always ranked as a top state park state. And you don't have to pay to go into state parks here. I mean, when I first showed up, we've got these pretty famous trout parks where they stock trout into some spring creeks every day. First time I showed up at one of those, I drove around for 15 minutes trying to figure out where I had to pay to get in.
Right.
And you don't have to pay. The sales tax covers it. So you're putting about $4, $5 a year into this sales tax. And for that, you get healthy drinking water, healthy soil, and the greatest state park system potentially in America that's free to enter. And so I basically ran the marketing communications committee, which was the only committee. They had the older, more established figureheads above me on this, but I got to go around the state really talking to a diverse group of people, from hardcore agriculture to hardcore environmentalists, conservationists, and everybody in between. And in the end of the day, and this is the same election, we're talking November 2016.
Okay.
Well, when Trump was elected, whenever that was.
Yeah.
God, it's been a blur.
Yeah, for sure.
We passed this vote in a time that our country's obviously shown a horrible divide.
Yeah.
We passed this vote with 80.1%. 80.1% of the people agreed on something.
Yeah.
And we won every county. Like, what can 80.1% of America agree on?
Yeah.
And in our state, we agree that healthy soil, healthy water, and good state parks that are free for everyone is something we all want to have together.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing feeling. It was a truth through experience that you think to yourself as an American, as a Missourian or a Montanan, that, gosh, if only we could.
Yeah.
If only we could set this aside and focus on what's best for all of us, you know, and put our little individual differences aside.
Yeah.
like public lands. How is public lands not good for all of us? Let's stop worrying about if you're a Democrat or a Republican, or, if you want to drill oil and I want to hunt pheasants and sage-grouse. Like, how can we do this together?
Right.
And this process showed me that it's doable.
Yeah.
It's doable.
Yeah.
We just got to figure out how to replicate that more.
We do, and it doesn't have to be on some type of overwhelming macro. It can be just one state at a time, right? One county at a time. And you know what I mean. Sometimes when you shoot for the stars, right, you don't ever get there. You just fall off.
Right.
But this is to me this is doable because it's done in one state, and this state is not particularly unified on anything any more than Alabama or Montana or Maine is.
No, we have two senators like everybody else. One's a Democrat, one's a Republican.
Right.
We're like, Missouri is like most states. We have a lot of rural population, but we also have two major metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
So you've got St. Louis and Kansas City that typically vote Democrat. Columbia in the middle with the university is usually voting Democrat, and then the rest of the state is red.
Yeah. And one of the things I'd like to ask you, where your cabin is and where I drove through and what we looked at yesterday, there's those incredible rivers and whatnot. But the people that live in the Ozarks, in the back country, they truly are a different kind of people.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming they're very conservative in their voting if they vote at all. But it's
recently, if you look at this state, it's turned over. Much of the country has. A good friend of mine who's a former legislator, he's on our CFM legislative caucus. He was a Democrat state rep.
CFM being Conservation Federation of Missouri. Go ahead.
Conservation Federation of Missouri, CFM. He was a Democrat from Eminence. Where we had lunch yesterday. Can you believe that? I mean, up until just recently, they had a Democrat out of the Ozarks as their state rep. And it's just because JC lived there and they knew him and they voted for the man and not the party.
Yeah.
And, the Ozarks, it's hard living. I mean, those are hard people down there scratching out a way of life that they're trying to hold on to. Yeah. And, forestry is a big thing. Logging is
huge. And
down there.
There's sawmills everywhere.
Right.
It's so different than where I grew up, where the sawmills have gone away. And there's not really a lot of timber cutting, a lot of management. Mm-hmm. For me, I like it. Like I love seeing small scale timber and the beautiful lumber, that white oak y'all got. Mm-hmm. But it's also radically autonomous people.
Yeah.
At
my cabin, you have to go 15 miles south or 25 miles north to get gas.
Yeah.
And that's in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And
it goes on and on. And and it is a lot of public land. It's incredible public land, but a lot of it is inhabited by people who obviously want to be. I'm sure there were families like you pointed out that had been in the same ridge or area for generation after generation. But it's a completely unique place and culture, and I'm so excited by finding it because I drove around it for 2 or 3 days there. And I've seen something I never dreamed existed, the vastness, and they all hunt and fish, buddy.
Yeah. It's my neighbor, Miss Cricket, she's 84 years old, and she's never lived anywhere but in Happy Hollow.
Yeah.
And her nephew, Edward, who's really taken on the patriarchal role of the family, he's 68, still works in the lead mine, can crush your hand if you try to shake it. He lives in the house that he was born in.
Yeah.
When I did my timber harvest, I gave him the logs that weren't sellable, and that's how they heat their house.
Yeah.
I mean, these people don't have much reliance on government or you telling them what to do.
Yep.
Well, and another big issue down there, I mean, it's a very anti-government part of the world.
Right.
We have a national park called the Ozark National Scenic Riverways, and it's 135 miles of riverways consisting of the Current River, the Jacks Fork, and the 11 Point, encompassing about 85,000 acres. It's a national park that you can hunt in. You can pull your canoe over at any point and set up your camp and gravel bar camp. And the Upper Current River and portions of the 11 Point are just pristine trout waters.
Well, the 11 Point comes right out of a huge spring, right?
The Current River comes out of a huge spring, Montauk Springs. And the Jacks Fork is world-class smallmouth fishing. But up until the 1960s, that was private land. So eminent domain is how we have that national park.
Gotcha.
And you come down and look at it and think how beautiful it is, and I look at it and think how beautiful it is. It made me want to build a cabin there to utilize. But my neighbors were displaced from their homelands.
Yeah.
They had to move.
Yeah.
And we're not talking in 1750. We're talking in 1950.
Right.
So these people are still alive. So you have first-generation Missourians still alive who had to pack their stuff. Now, they were paid, but they were unwillingly paid to move off their land.
Yeah.
So not only do these people still hold this animosity and resentment to government for forcing them off these lands that city folk now come down and utilize.
Yeah.
They've talked about it so much that they've ingrained that anti-government sentiment into the second and third generations.
Yep.
Who, we all look up to our dad and our granddad. Sure. So if granddad don't like something, I'm going to dislike it even more.
Yep, you bet.
And that's the way we have a lot of government sentiment down there. So, me coming down and my truck with the CFM logos on it and stuff, I'm an outsider. And
right.
I've strategically made some good friends who are trying to help me ingrain into this community, and it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
I've heard all the rumors that I'm an FBI agent. Who knows what I'm down there undercover doing. So people are weary. People are really weary. And this new state park came in, and that's a whole nother story. But the former governor of Missouri, built this incredible state park, and it's bringing a lot of traffic to the area. Now it's bringing jobs, which is good. A lot of economy is coming into the area now that wasn't there before through tourism. But at the same time, my road, which I think there's 20 people and 200 hounds on that road.
200 hunting dogs. Everywhere in those blue barrels.
There's, there hasn't been a new house there in 20 years.
Yeah.
And there's been 2 this year.
Yeah.
And that's got people really worried.
I bet.
So it's a real backwoods part of the world.
Yeah.
But so I bought 45 acres, but out my back door is a 68,000 acre contiguous wilderness area.
Yeah.
That if I ask a buddy in Indiana or I ask a buddy in Colorado, they've never heard of it.
Yeah.
They've heard of the Bob Marshall.
Sure.
They've heard of a lot of these other famous wilderness areas, but we have those here in the Midwest that people just aren't aware of and they don't utilize. So, I'm hunting. I've killed 3 bucks in 2 years out of that wilderness area and good ones too.
Yeah.
And I've identified, I live pretty much in the center of the county, and I've identified 3 different ways that I can walk out of Shannon County on public land.
Yeah. Each
trail being at least 20 miles long.
Wow.
So, like, the public land expanses that we have here in the Ozarks they're absolutely phenomenal. And for a guy who grew up in northern Indiana where public land just does not exist, there's, maybe 10 fish and wildlife areas totaling 50,000 acres in the northern half of the state of Indiana.
Yeah.
And then I go out to Colorado and Montana, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You mean I don't even have to sign in?
Right.
I don't have to get in a drawing to get a spot to hunt a piece of public land that everybody knows doesn't have any deer?
Yeah.
Like I did in Indiana when I was in college.
Yeah.
So I can just go out there, so I fully embraced that. I had a bivouac. Many nights I would get a hotel room for my job, do my computer work, leave my computer and clothes there, go camp in the national forest because I'd rather sleep under a tree than in a Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
And then I'd come back and shower and put my tie on for work the next morning.
Yeah.
So I learned and embraced this public lands mentality, and I maintain a lot of friends out west. And Tony Bynum said, "You're one of the only guys in the Midwest that gets it." And that's not true.
No, that's not true.
That's not true at all.
Yeah.
But I'm one of the only guys in the Midwest that's really talking Midwest public lands.
Yeah.
In reference to what I learned in Western public lands. And unfortunately, it also goes unknown to so many people that we face the same kind of fights. It's just not on the same scale. When you're talking about the expanses of federal public lands in the West, we're not fighting those kind of fights, but we're fighting things right now. For instance, I don't care how far you drill down in politics, you're going to find bad apples. Mm-hmm. Most people that get into politics aren't bad people. I don't want to talk to any politician or no politician.
Right.
Well,
that's kind of nihilistic, actually.
Yeah. And one of the best ways I've been told to look at the state legislature is it's a true representation of society in the sense that you've got some excellence at the top
Yeah.
And then you got a big middle class of people who are there for the right reasons. Something maybe has got them stirred up and they want to fix that, or just in general, they've had an interest in trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, you've got some real trouble. You got some bad people that slipped in on that deal as well.
And as we were talking about, some people that are very effective, smart, engaged, ready, well, they're not in politics because they're busy.
Oh, yeah.
Doing
So
their thing.
state reps and state senators in Missouri make $30,000.
Yeah.
So who can do that?
Yeah.
Retired people can do that. Farmers can do that.
Right. Lawyers
can do it with higher political aspirations.
Yeah.
I'm not giving up my job to go make $30,000 a year. So, I mean, it's a small segment of the population that's willing to take those jobs.
Yeah.
And
some of those people are noble, like you just said.
Amazing people.
They are. Some of them are noble.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not fun.
Right.
Like, it's not fun.
Yeah.
But there's a rep down in the Ozarks right now who, I mean, half of his, forestry and floating, those are the two big things you saw down there. How many canoe liveries did we go past?
More than I could ever imagine.
Dozens of them.
And
right?
horseback riding deal in Eminence.
Yeah. Like 3,000 stalls at the Great American
for
Trail
endurance
ride.
riding. And
so we'll have that town of 400 will turn into a town of 10,000 for trail riding.
All based on those rivers and that access to public land.
That's right. All because they're riding on public land through the Ozark National Rivers. And here's a state rep who's taking payoff money from a wealthy guy who owns property on the Gasconade that does not want anybody pulling their canoe up on his gravel bar.
Right.
So this guy is willing to just turn his back on his entire region, the entire industry that makes their living on the fact that we can get in a canoe and go down these rivers and pull over. So in Missouri, the stream access law is up to the high water mark.
Okay.
So the beauty is we have incredible gravel bars. These are all just rock bottom rivers.
I saw them.
Beautiful, crystal clear streams with gravel bottoms. And you pull over on these gravel bars and you have a campfire and you have dinner and you set up your tent and you stay the night, and the high water mark is private property. Now, do a few bad apples try to ruin that for the rest of us? Of course, like in anything in life. But for most part, people are good and they abide by the fact that you stay in that range from the water to the high water mark and you don't go mess with people's private land.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants that. But, of course, some rich people, just like in Montana, just like down there by the Ruby.
No, man.
They want to close us off from all of it.
It's constant.
And here's a guy that's taking money from a donor and running bills every year.
Yeah.
Thankfully, and I wrote about this for BHA, which was cool because Don Thomas wrote about it from Montana. I wrote about it from Missouri, and it was part of that same article together.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The master and the student,
Yeah. And this was at BHA magazine?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Last year, I think.
Gotcha.
And,
I missed that. I would have honed in on that. Yeah.
So last year, every bill gets a hearing in the House, and this guy, I do a lobby day at the Capitol where I bring about 30 organizations together, and we'll have over 500 people show up every year. It's called Conservation Day at the Capitol. And I don't know to this day if it was coincidental, I think it was, or if somebody just did me a divine favor. But they scheduled the hearing for that river rights bill on Conservation Day at the Capitol last year.
Yeah.
So when we went down, so normally I'm down there by myself or with a couple people testifying against all these bad ideas. Well, I took about 100 of my closest friends to that hearing last year. And we got in there and the rep went up to introduce his bill, and at that point, even his friends on the committee, it's the Conservation Natural Resources Committee, said, how many people are here in support of this bill? Not a single person raised their hand. How many people are here in opposition to this bill? 100 hands went up in the room. And man, they all of a sudden, all those other people who probably would have just let it go or voted with them by party were like, why are you bringing us this horrible bill? This is the worst bill I've ever written, you know?
Yeah.
So it was pretty fun to go up. So it doesn't move, and a lot of these bills get filed just as like, if you're giving me money for my campaign and I promise you I'll file this bill.
I've delivered it.
I delivered it.
Yeah.
I tried my hardest.
Yeah.
Can I have some more money?
I won't. Yeah. I tried to block the people out of their rivers.
Right.
I tried to get rid of their forests.
Don't want to see any more of those damn canoes coming down the river.
Those fishermen.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things I get to do for fun on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, man, I can't believe you hunt and fish for a living. Like,
right. Does it ever feel like you're just living in a storm?
It is. And like you were talking about, it can wear you out. I mean, And I think that's part of the goal. I think part of the goal is they throw so much at you that you get diluted and your forces get diluted. And, we have like a tree of people, like a phone tree. Like, we got to call this guy, this guy, this guy.
Yeah.
Well, how many times can you ask the same person to come to the Capitol to defend conservation?
Yeah.
And the general public doesn't know, as we were talking about. And, everybody even listening, I'll go into rooms of like-minded individuals. Let's just use, for example, the Gateway chapter of Trout Unlimited in St. Louis, which is the fastest growing Trout Unlimited chapter in the country right now.
Okay.
I go into that room and I'll say, all right, if you voted in the last election, raise your hand. 90% of the hands in the room go up.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't vote, you lie about it and raise your hand.
I'm a responsible citizen, I swear.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so keep your hand in the air if you voted for your state rep and your state senator. All the hands stay up, right? Because nobody fills out half a ballot. Okay, I got this T-shirt here for the first person in the room that can name their state representative and their state senator. Mm-hmm. Crickets. Mm-hmm. Crickets.
No T-shirt for you.
So you voted for these people.
Yeah.
You don't know who they are. If you don't know who they are, you certainly don't know what they're doing, because most people don't read a newspaper today anyways, and most newspapers don't cover local politics.
Yeah.
So you don't know who these people are. You don't know what's going on in Jefferson City. You can tell me the latest stupid thing that was said by some federal politician. I don't care which side of the aisle you're talking about. And, but you don't know what's happening at your own state house. And the fact of the matter is, what happens in your state government directly impacts your life, much more so than what happens at the federal government. You look at the federal government, we're talking overall military protection, the federal tax code, but that doesn't impact your county tax code or your state tax code.
Right.
What you pay in Missouri isn't what you pay in California. Mm-hmm. So there's all these things that happen at the state level, and everybody's up in arms, marching and protesting and talking about federal politics, but they can't even name a single representative of their own at the state level. And that's where the rubber really meets the road.
It's a dramatic failure of ours.
It's a dramatic failure, and it's so frustrating. I just want people to engage. And I will say this, and this isn't a shameless plug, but BHA is in the process of launching a Missouri chapter right now.
Okay.
Some great guys came together, and it was truly inspiring. My membership is generally older, well-funded. We get on this conference call with Ty out of the BHA office is setting up this chapter, and so I'm an advisor to the chapter. I said, guys, I can't be on it in my job, but I expect you to join as an affiliate, and we're going to work together. But I honestly feel like the cavalry is coming over the hill, because another TU chapter or DU chapter or Elk Foundation chapter, they can all crop up. Yeah. And they're going to go to their banquets and they're going to drink beer and buy auction items and raise money for conservation that's going to go back to those national offices.
Right.
But it's a hard time to get those guys to come testify in hearings and stuff. Well, that's what BHA does. Yeah. So, I've talked to the director of the Department of Conservation about this. I've talked to a number of my board members about this. Like, here's a group that's finally coming into Missouri of guys. And when we were on that call, 17 dudes set up this. Unfortunately, there were no women. We need to make sure we work harder to get involved.
That's actually coming. Yeah,
it's coming.
I see that all the time.
But the amazing thing was, the oldest guy on the phone call was 51.
Yep.
Right? So we were all mid-30s to 50.
Yep.
And it's just somehow BHA has tapped that vein. And I'm excited about these guys that are going to be there and start. And they're interested, The more I feed them, the more their heads start to spin, and they can't believe this is going on. They didn't know about it. And
you mean in Missouri?
These Missouri BHA guys, they've got a real robust base camp thread going. Every day I'm like, all right, today's the day. I got to tell them to take me off this damn email list. But then I'm going to miss what they're doing. I'm enthused by it. So I get 200 to 500 emails a day. So I'm trying to whittle them down, and I just can't get out of this chain that they're all talking in.
Yeah.
But I feel like, all right, man, the movement is happening here. It's starting to move east. And, you asked me about the podcast, what you can do, and you're doing it.
Yeah.
You start diversifying it a little bit and telling these Eastern stories, Alabama stories, Indiana
Smoky
stories.
Mountains, man.
Michigan.
And then what I wanted, and when you and I, and I'll admit this, I messed up the podcast we did the first time and didn't get it recorded right. And it was very depressing to me and very stressful. But
it worked out because now you're here.
But now I'm here. And one of the things was I wanted to bring it here because you're carrying the fire. You Brandon Butler. I mean, that's the truth of it. And you're carrying the fire, and you're in the heart of where a lot of it came from. And you were talking about the Leopold stuff the other day, and I was looking through your library at both at the cabin and here, and between all the fiction, the Jim Harrison, and then the Leopold and all the stuff that you're steeped in this. You're carrying the fire from the fire.
I'm lucky, man. I've found a way to not have a job. Like, I would be doing this stuff for free if people didn't pay me.
Yeah.
I love it. I've loved it since I was a boy.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to pass it on. I'm pretty proud of the fact that I'm becoming old enough to recognize the importance of sharing it. And I've got some young kids that I mentor. I run the governor's youth turkey hunt here in Missouri.
Yeah.
We've started including foster children in that. I've got a young man that I've kind of taken under my wing. I've got two beautiful daughters. The older one has killed a turkey and shows flashes of interest in hunting.
Yeah.
The younger one you've met, she's the most soft-hearted human being I've ever met in my life.
We need them too, man.
Yeah, if I can keep her out of PETA, I'm doing a good job. But she draws the birds, and the older one shoots them.
Yeah.
And but I'm finding other opportunities, and I think that's a good example for other people. Maybe you don't have a child at home anymore. There are so many kids out there that were like me that just wanted to get out and do these sort of things at a young age. And we also have to focus on getting adults in. Like, that was what was so cool about the governor's youth turkey hunt last year. I've got a friend who's been very successful in business. He's truly a billionaire, not like a fake billionaire. He's a real one.
Yeah.
Showed up in America at 7 years old with a backpack. When Eastern Europe broke up, his family had to flee. He was a refugee, got sponsored by a family that brought him to St. Louis. And he's built this life that's just phenomenal. I mean, he basically says if you drink out of a aluminum can on planet Earth, he had something to do with the manufacturing of that can. So he's built factories. He has patented this process, and he builds factories in every country you can imagine: Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, the Philippines, all across North America, South America. And his passion is grasslands. So he's got a 1,600-acre farm up in Putnam County, right on the Iowa border. And now he's started a new company called Raceline Alternative Energies. And he's working with Smithfield Foods, which is the largest hog producer in the world.
Yep.
And they've got 50,000 acres. And Rudy is the kind of guy that looks at problems with a big picture mentality. So the department's doing a good job, and the Prairie Foundation's doing a good job of adding 250 acres of prairie this year and 1,000 acres next year. He looks at things like Smithfield Foods, who's taking all their hog manure, and they need all this land to spread out hog manure after it dries in the lagoons.
Yeah.
And he's like, wait a minute, that hog manure has value. And if I don't have to put that hog manure on those lands, they can strip the fescue off of it and replant 50,000 acres at native prairie grasses. And if they're making money off of hog shit that they weren't making before, that gives them the funds to do that. So this guy's a genius. I mean, that's why he's so successful. And he has figured out basically in this digestion thing. He didn't create digestion. He's just taken it to another level where
the digestion of hog manure.
Yeah. So he tarps over the lagoons, sucks off the methane, refines that, turns it into a biodiesel. Duke Energy's buying it. Other customers are buying it. Smithfield Foods is profiting off of it. He's profiting off of it. All that carbon isn't going into the air off of this manure that's evaporating. And now he's turning 50,000 acres into prairie lands again.
Wow.
So it's an amazing, amazing process. So working
at a time when the grassland ecosystem is the most endangered ecosystem in the planet, other than sagebrush.
We've got a really great foundation here called the Missouri Prairie Foundation, and they work real hard to restore any native prairie they can save. They do have two, but of course that's so minimal at this point. They're working a lot on restoration efforts of prairie, but it's neat, and that's fun for me to sit here and think that we're talking grasslands and prairie, because the position I'm in now has really expanded, my knowledge of conservation, and I learn more every day. I'm surrounded by experts, and I know a little bit about a lot of things.
Sure.
I'm surrounded by these people
but you also know people who know a lot about it.
Yeah, it's so much fun, man. That's the fun part of being the writer, too.
Yeah, that's the key to being a writer.
There's always the stories to find and learn more, and it's amazing. It's cool.
It's been good to both of us. It's a harsh taskmaster.
It is.
Sorry
I didn't have heat in the cabin.
Yeah. It was a pretty interesting experience. You put the ice out there, and the ice is there, same looked in the morning, and then the ice is on everything else.
I don't remember how long I walked away from my whiskey drink, but it froze solid.
Man.
I had to go pour another one.
Yeah.
But I gave you 2 sleeping bags.
Yeah. Well, we did all right. I think my dog couldn't get in the sleeping bag because he had claustrophobia or whatever, so he suffered somewhat.
We made it.
Even from a Montana dog, it was a cold night, man.
It was. I think the temperature, that's what makes it so nice in the summer, is the fact that temperature drops a lot further deep in the holler. And we've got that beautiful creek coming through and all that.
I mean, the system of creeks in there, and I know we got to close, but the system in there, Sinking Creek to Current River, and then like coming over the jacks and all. I mean, it's got to be one of the greatest smallmouth river fisheries in the country, right?
Well, when we went to Alley Spring.
Yeah, or Alley Spring. Holy smokes,
man.
So
Alley Spring this is all spring fed, right? So I used to fish in the Paradise Valley and was lucky to get on some of those spring creeks.
Yep.
To pay $100 a day and go in
like
there.
Odell's or
Dupays.
Yeah, Dupays,
all that. And now these are spring creeks. I mean, we've got these springs. Some of them are the largest in the world that are pumping out hundreds of millions of gallons of spring water a day.
I mean, it's a blue hole of an acre or more in extent, probably.
And right now, that water coming out of the ground is 52 degrees. It's 52 degrees all year long. So what about that wad of smallmouth?
And then there's just some stud smallmouth under that overhang.
Come out of the river and up the spring to a 52-degree pool of water when the river's probably running closer to 35 degrees.
Yeah, it was cold. Yeah.
So it's amazing to see the smallmouth
and
come
I was thinking I'm coming through that too. The vegetation in that spring is just shocking in its colors,
Yeah.
And there's a blue hole, but beyond, as it shallows out enough to have weeds and kind of like it looks like watercress, but it's not. But it's a shocking natural phenomenon, that water pulsing up out of there, and it's huge.
Oh, and Alley's not even one of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
It's one of the prettier ones with the old mill house there.
Yeah.
The fact that it's part of the national park system now. Big Spring down by Van Buren is much bigger. You saw Round Spring. Didn't get to take you up to the Devil's Well. When you come back in the summer, we'll go do that. The Devil's Well is a huge underground lake, basically. That's a spring. There's just so many. And the Current River, it starts up at Montauk, and we talked a little bit about the trout parks, and Montauk's a trout park where the department bases the number of trout that go in each day on the number of people that fish there over a different allotment of time.
Yeah.
And then that runs for maybe a couple miles, and then it just turns into the upper Current River.
Okay.
And there's some wade fishing that takes place in the upper stretches right below the park. But then there's about a 10-mile section really that runs down to about Cedar Grove. And truly, I don't know if another person is running a raft. I'm running an Outcast Pack 14 raft here in Missouri.
From your Montana days.
Yeah, people look at it like it's a spaceship. I had one guy actually call it a spaceship.
Yeah.
But I'm floating that stretch. And I'll tell you, man, like when I got out west and was fishing Colorado a lot and the Frying Pan and the South Platte, and then even into Montana when I was on the Bighorn a lot and such, the crowds, they diminish the experience for me.
Yep.
And especially the Frying Pan, that area up by Aspen, when you got to wait for somebody to get out of the hole so you can get into the hole and fish to the fish they were just fishing to.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not me. And this section of the Current River, I mean, I'll put it up against anywhere as far as fish and numbers, size and numbers. We have just incredible brown trout, just stud brown trout.
Yeah.
And I won't see anybody else. Like, it's my river that day. And some canoes will come through in the summer, and there are canoe hatches in the summer. But in those upper stretches where the water is real cold, that's not where the heavy canoeing goes on. So for those of you guys listening out west that see all these people coming east to fish your waters. We'll get even with them.
Yeah.
Come to the Ozarks and fish ours, because unfortunately most people from the east are driving right past Missouri to get to Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and they're all crowding into the same rivers that are so publicized. But you can come down to Missouri and you can get on these rivers and you can start in the trout water, fish that for a day or two, camp along the shore, and then just keep going down until it turns into smallmouth water and fish all of it.
And it's got a storied history of smallmouth fishing.
Oh,
I mean, you were showing me those river boats they had in the old days.
The wooden river boats. They just pull you down the river.
Yeah, and that was fishing, right?
Yeah, and another thing that started in the olden days that we still do now is gigging.
Yep.
And your buddy Anthony Bourdain came.
Right, not my buddy, but I'll take it. Yeah,
I'm jealous.
I was on the show. I'd like
to meet him, man.
That was a lot of fun, and I had seen that because I've been reading Daniel Woodrell, the novelist.
Yeah.
And me and you were talking about
Winter's Bone.
Yeah, and Johnny Sane and I were talking about he knew them all, because he's from the Ozarks too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he wrote Winter's Bone. He wrote Woe to Live On, the incredible Missouri Border Wars book, and he was the guest on that segment of Anthony Bourdain's show. And what Woodrell wanted him to see was to gig Red Horse and have a fish fry on a gravel bar.
It's amazing. So what we're talking about is
spear and fish. So that's their West Plains, right?
Yeah, if anybody doesn't know what gigging is, it's just spear and fish with like a pitchfork that is forged out of steel and put on a long pole. And today we do it with jet boats. But back in the day, it was those wooden boats with a lantern. And you just coasted down the river, and you get right over the top of a school of suckers or just an individual, and you spear it and you bring it up. And
they run in April.
Yeah. Well, no.
March.
Gigging season's about to end now. So it's
winter.
It's late fall through early winter. And
I noticed they're all dressed up in coats and stuff in that show.
Yeah, if you've never eaten a sucker, they're incredibly good. It's almost like you dump sugar on a fish, but they're full of bone. So these guys, like everybody down here is just like we talked about. They just survive. They figure things out and do it their own way. So I went with this state senator, and he's got a scoring machine that looks like one of them old-fashioned credit card machines, kind of souped up. Yeah. So you fillet these fish like any, and then you put it on this scoring machine. It's got all these round blades on it, and you just zip it across it twice, and that just will cut the bones.
Yeah.
You can't get all the bones out, but you can cut the bones by scoring them like that, and then you batter it and fry it, and the bones at that point are scored so small that they'll dissolve.
Gotcha.
And you can eat those. So it's a big deal. To have
I've eaten them. I never knew how you did that. We used to just pick it out, little by little, and that is a hard. You got to be hungry.
You got, but it's cool to see the culture come together, and you go down the river any night, and it reminds me of when I was growing up when there were still smelt runs on Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
When I was real young, I'd get to go out to Lake Michigan, and we'd stretch nets from the beach out to the first sandbar.
Yeah.
And those smelt would run through, and the guys would stretch these long nets, almost look like a volleyball net, but of course much smaller squares. And you bring those smelt back up, and you just cut their heads off and gut them with a finger,
dip
them in batter and fry them on the beach.
Yeah.
And that's gone. That smelt runs over in Lake Michigan. But now I can do it with suckers on the gravel bar in the Ozarks.
Yeah, right. And the headwaters of most of that's protected. You're going to have it for a long time, forever, man.
Hopefully.
Yeah, it goes back to, and I'd have to paraphrase this, but a Tom McGuane quote, which I think comes from the essay "The Heart of the Game," and he said, "A country where a day's worth of groceries or food can be taken is as important to societal sanity as the idea of a day's wage for a day's pay."
That's one writer I'd like to meet.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, he's a good one. I wish I could have met Jim Harrison.
Yep.
Now I'd hate to miss an opportunity to meet Thomas McGuane.
Yeah. Well, he's the real thing on the fishing and hunting world.
Oh, yeah.
So was Harrison. Harrison was a food guy but they were. Have you seen the movie Tarpon?
Of course, I own it.
Yeah.
I show it to people all the time.
Yeah.
They just live life to the fullest.
Yeah.
They didn't miss an opportunity to live.
And they were
alive.
They were deeply embedded in he was Upper Peninsula.
His cabin's for sale right now.
Really? In the UP?
Yeah, up by Grand Marais.
Yeah.
I showed it to my wife. And she's like, would you trade your Ozark cabin for that cabin?
Yeah.
I said, no, I would not.
No, I couldn't. Yeah. Well, hey, Brandon, it's been a good time, man.
I really appreciate you coming to Missouri and helping me get the word out about this incredible place.
Yeah, and y'all's work. I mean, you're like I said, you're carrying the fire from the heart of the fire.
Well,
so
I'm
proud to know you.
If you're gonna throw out quotes, I'll have to throw one too. And Chris Christopherson once said that I can't believe my heroes have become my friends.
Right on.
And that's how I feel about you sitting here right now.
Cool, man. That's high praise, man. I'll see you.
See you later.